What to do, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Mike Shinoda's debut studio album from the summer of 2018, Post Dramatic. Now, this came on the heels of Chester Bennington's sudden death in the summer of 2017. And this is kind of the after effect of the emotions and the response and just the concepts that Mike Shinoda had after that terrible thing kind of happened. And I look after this particular situation. This is a great album, and in my opinion, this is kind of like a pseudo Linkin Park album and a perfect denouement to that saga. Now, Linkin Park still has music that comes out, but in terms of original content, this is definitely something that just kind of feels like another Linkin Park album in a lot of ways. This is very much an executed album in that sense, and I kind of feel like there's a lot of good things on this moment. It's kind of similar to One More Light, the same kind of like Linkin Park, the direction they were going before they abruptly ended was they were beginning to go in like an electronica. I mean, they were electronic in the early 2010s, but it seemed like they were going for more like a pop rock and kind of electronic pop type atmosphere that was really looking severely interesting before that abrupt end kind of happened. And that's the thing about One More Light. Now, this album does not wholesomely continue that aspect, but it at least does it in like one single to where you get the concept of, hey, this is kind of what Linkin Park was onto. And I think it's just the perfect kind of example of like the concepts of Linkin Park and that sort of thing. It's just really like it being such a terrible thing about Linkin Park's end and what happened with Chester Bennington and his unhappiness and that type stuff. I definitely kind of feel like, this is just an album that Linkin Park, the Linkin Park fan club, the Linkin Park circle, the Fort Minor fan club, all these folks, they need to hear this album because, I mean, even if you're a fan of new metal and you remember like when you were 15 or 12 or 20 or something like that, and songs like Crawling and In the End and Paper Cut were kind of charting really high, and some of the stuff from Meteora and Minutes to Midnight. This is another album that is basically necessary to hear. I just feel like, despite the fact that when Linkin Park was still around back in 2016 and 2017, some folks said, oh, Linkin Park fell off, they're not what they were back in 2001. This is very much counter that's on the contrary. And I think that that's kind of the concept. It's just a very, like, Mike Shinoda is on fire on this album. The songwriting is great. The production is fantastic. This is probably one of the best rock album productions that is fused with hip hop and electro pop that I've seen in a long time, and just has perfect moods. It suits blue collar, it suits work, it suits jobs, it suits night venues, it suits dance clubs, it suits regular clubs and just night venues in general. This is a pretty social and very aware kind of album that I think deserves a lot of its polish just in terms of what it got. And it just has the perfect kind of approach towards it. It's just too bad that it had to be in such a terrible kind of dissonant mood. I mean, it does kind of like Mike Shinoda even rubs off some of the bloodletting that Chester Bennington is so known for. He kind of gets into some of those moods. This does kind of almost feel like kind of a emo album in a lot of ways, that same sort of kind of brooding and that type stuff. There's some of that here that, most of the time Mike Shinoda was not the one that did that. He was kind of like the straight man in the situation between those sorts of situations in Linkin Park, but he actually does some of that stuff here and pulls it off. And it's just a very kind of brooding album, but it has a mixture of things where it's not just one mood the whole way through. It has an amalgamation. This is a pretty eclectic and varietized album that deserves a lot of its success. So I just would have to say, yeah, this is a great album to mess with Linkin Park if you know everything by them. I mean, if you know everything by them, I would assume that you've at least seen this project by now. It's almost 5 years old, but just to kind of say, I wouldn't think, oh, well, this is only Mike Shinoda. It's, this is very much, in my opinion, like a further Linkin Park album. It kind of makes me wish that Mike Shinoda would continue his solo career. He did do like some art albums or something like that, but another album like this would be pretty awesome to kind of get. So there were 3 singles on this album. I'm going to go ahead and talk about those. So the first single is Crossing a Line. And this one is very much, if you like Linkin Park's One More Light album, songs like Heavy and some of those type songs that kind of had that pop rock kind of electronic type feel, this is very much in that vein, Crossing a Line. This really feels like Chester Bennington should be singing this hook. This really fits. Mike Shinoda pulls off those vibes that Chester was doing in 2017 and 2014, and it just works pretty well as far as getting that. This is definitely, in my opinion, like a morning kind of makeshift kind of song. This is a rock music. This seemed like a rock music staple in the late 2010s and stuff. And I just would have to say it's a pretty good hit. Crossing the Line is a pretty chartable hit, and kind of carries that same kind of moody, kind of brooding energy that was known for Linkin Park and that sort of thing. So it's just a good makeshift song, good song that you can hear at work, good song for the morning, 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at morning when you're getting like hash browns and croissants and that type of stuff. This perfect little breakfast song and that type of stuff, just cruising about in the car. And Nothing Makes Sense Anymore is another one. This is another morning song. Like both of these are just great kind of morning time and kind of going to work, getting coffee, that type of stuff kind of feels towards it. Especially Nothing Makes Sense. That one's a little bit more morning oriented. It feels like this feels like real dawn, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning type production. Yeah, I mean, this one's not quite as chart ready. I don't feel like Nothing Makes Sense Anymore is quite as chart ready as Crossing the Line, but it is kind of like a nice promotional single and B side to that kind of concept. These are like a nice 1-2 punch for some morning coffee, breakfast type, makeshift blue collar type work type stuff. And then Make It Up As I Go is a great second single. This one has a real nice dance club feel, and it's a little bit different from what Linkin Park typically did. This is kind of an original sense of something that I felt like was unique to Mike Shinoda, just because I do feel like Linkin Park has made like nightclub songs and that type stuff, but this one really felt like a dance club kind of song. It was just an interesting kind of booty shaker and that type stuff that was just surprising that it kind of had that kind of energy about it. It was just a real nice kind of, I almost want to say tribal, but this kind of more like bewildered kind of song. It just felt a little bit more outlandish and that type of stuff, but it worked. It's kind of similar to like Pray for Me off the Black Panther soundtrack. Very similar to that. It was just a nice kind of outlandish kind of production, but it worked as a great dance club song and as a new interesting angle for like the Linkin Park world to kind of do that. It was a pretty nice one. I'm going to go ahead and talk. I'm reviewing the deluxe edition, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the 16 songs out of 18 that I recommend to you. So there are really only 2 songs I don't recommend, and those songs would just be the intro song, Place to Start, and then song 15, The World's on Fire. So this album's going to get a 10. I basically, I guess I don't need to recommend these songs to you just because, like I said, those were the only 2 songs I didn't enjoy, but I'm just going to there's a lot of songs to remember here, so I'm just going to have to kind of skim through some of these just because 16 songs that I liked out of 18. Now, there's a lot of music that I like, and there's a lot of albums that I do score pretty high, but in terms of the concept of liking that many songs, where it basically is 98, 97% of the project, 95% of the project that I liked, it's kind of difficult to remember 16 songs, that many that were that enjoyable, but I'm just going to go through some of these. I felt like pretty much one of the best beats on this album was IOU. Perfect nightclub beat, this real swirling kind of haunting kind of club cut on there. I feel like Brooding was a great instrumental. This is really one that just kind of makes you want to travel and be on like the subway and that type of stuff. It's just a real haunting and kind of, this is a great brooding song that's typical of the Linkin Park fanfare. Definitely the sort of stuff that just has that kind of moodiness that you need and just of vintage Linkin Park. I feel like Ghost is a nice one just because this kind of starts off in like a haunting. This has a haunting beat on here, but then it kind of switched to like a piano like makeshift type song in like the second verse, but it pulls it off pretty well because this is one where I think Mike Shinoda doesn't cuss on. Yeah, Ghost is one that Mike Shinoda doesn't cuss on, so this is kind of one of a more blue collar type song, but it also is kind of like a mild, I would just say it's kind of a more kind of jivey blue collar song where not every single one just has like that upbeat and kind of pep in your step, happy go lucky kind of. This doesn't have that happy go lucky kind of blue collar feel. This is actually one that has some of the moodiness, but you're still at work kind of feel. So I like the fact that Mike Shinoda did that. Over Again and About You are some great club cuts. These are definitely like some nice paced ones. I kind of feel like there's a good assortment of like some nightclub songs, but then I feel like Hold It Together is a really nice good dance club song. This is one that kind of has that sort of pace. So really, it's tough to kind of, like I said, it's kind of tough to remember all these, but there are some dance club songs. Like I feel like What the Words Meant is like a trance song. This is one that kind of has like a trance. This is about the only trance song on here, but it's kind of like a what the words meant is kind of like a late 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning trance rave type song. This real kind of soft and kind of mild energy, but still feels like a trance song, and just kind of getting ready to go home. But just kind of the dancing is more slow dancing, that type feel. So that was a nice one that Mike Shinoda did. There's some dance club songs in here with Hold It Together and Make It Up As I Go. There are some more blue collar songs with Prove You Wrong. I feel like Ghosts, Prove You Wrong, and Nothing Makes Sense Anymore, some makeshift songs. So there's a good assortment of some of these. Like Lift Off with Chino Marino from Deftones, and then Machine Gun Kelly is a nice one. This is like a smoke ready song. This is more of like a hip hop song. This is definitely one that felt like a soulful kind of Rick Ross and Play a Circle type song, just in a more just kind of a more sophisticated, soulful type feel, something to smoke to. I don't know if Mike Shinoda smokes, but it's definitely a nice one to kind of light up to, and this feels like a nice, sophisticated, soulful type one. It's real hazy. Yeah, there's just too many to list in terms of all the quality that kind of goes along with it. Suffice to say that there's plenty of makeshift songs, blue collar makeshift songs. There's some nice mid dance club songs in here. There's definitely a small handful of dance club songs, and there's actually more than often there's a surprising amount of nightclub and kind of night venue songs. There's definitely some restaurant and kind of nightclubs, stepping out, places where you're going to hear music at night, places not so much promo, but just places where there's going to be music and kind of festivities, bars and booths, and kind of more stepping out, sitting down, dancing a little bit, and that type of stuff. This is a very festive kind of album. It has plenty of moments for that, and this is just an overall pretty abundantly kind of sophisticated type project for that sort of thing. I would have liked, if anything, I would have only liked more guests, but I definitely feel like the concept behind this album is it's quite packed to the gills, just with plenty of stepping out kind of moments. And this is the sort of album, I think enough people complained about One More Light from Linkin Park, but I definitely think if Linkin Park would have continued, this is the stuff that they would. I definitely think if Linkin Park would have continued, this is the stuff they would have made, just because this is very similar, just because One More Light was only about a year old by the time that uh, Post Dramatic came out, so very much was still fresh in people's minds. So you get the after effect of kind of getting this as a combination. I would definitely recommend to get these albums as a 1-2 punch. Pick up One More Light, then pick up Post Dramatic, because they very much are of the same feel, and they are just very eclectic and have like a lot of charming kind of stepping out kind of moments that have a very visual and vibrant kind of sense of like going out and about. And it's just very interesting just the way that Mike Shinoda pulls it off. And he's a good singer. These are catchy choruses, these are catchy beats, and these are just overall catchy kind of particular moments just for having a good jivey time. So it's just interesting just because this album could have come off as just being more of like kind of like a more insulated, Mike Shinoda could have isolated and just made a bunch of songs that were just very personal and very square like, but he at least chose to go out and he kind of chose to put on like a work face and grin and bear it and that type stuff. Even if he was really morbidly upset on this album, it still is very festive and enjoyable, and Mike Shinoda doesn't really tug at you in ways that you feel bad. I mean, he feels bad, but he doesn't kind of make the album crappy as a result of that. And I think that's very awesome that this is a great album. It's just outstanding that despite how horrible Mike Shinoda was feeling at this point, that this continues to be such an awesome album, and it kind of really meshed into like terrific kind of fanfare and really carried on the Linkin Park legacy the way that it needed to. So that's definitely an awesome concept. So the score gets a 10 out of 10. And I feel like the social score is going to get a 10 out of 10 also. Great, this field day with just going out and stepping out and just having a great time. And even with the lyrics kind of having the concepts of kind of being numb and brooding and kind of upset and some of that type of stuff, even if it's not a hop and bop album, he does carry the mood to where it actually is enjoyable and you agree with what he's saying. Just because, yeah, it's important. The concept of Chester Bennington's death is a terrible situation, but he does make this project, and I mean, this is very much like an album that you can relate to. So I think that that's kind of the concept. So yeah, in terms of the future, like Mike Shinoda has not dropped an album since 2018, at least not one like this. He did drop like 3 art albums in 2020. I don't know if I'll review those, but I do definitely feel like this is a great send off to Linkin Park, and it's a great catalog of hits. Definitely a great catalog of hits. 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 social. Just a great time, and just field it. Just a field day of just exuberant kind of night venue moments and just great gloss. Yeah, I would definitely like some more Link. I would definitely like some more Mike Shinoda albums. I would definitely like some more Mike Shinoda albums like this one. He's getting ready to be on a song on the Scream 6 soundtrack, but hopefully that translate into more albums from Mike Shinoda, because this is definitely a great grasp of what's kind of just a complete colossal hit rock album circa the late 2010s, which we definitely needed.